Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to chapter 17 of SEP 272. We're going to be going over concentration and focus today. These are one of the most important critical skills for athletes. It's often misunderstood by coaches and by athletes in the sense that it's really hard to understand how to train athletes to focus. Many coaches expect that it's something that athletes should just know how to do. And one of the most common types of feedback that coaches give to athletes is just telling them to focus, right? That's all you need to do, just focus. And yet, really, they don't tell them how to do it or what it takes to do it. And so, really, they have no idea what they're doing. So, this chapter, we're going to hopefully get a better sense of what it means to concentrate and get focused, and then give you some strategies for how to better use this skill. So first, let's talk about the terminology here. What is concentration? And really, in this chapter, concentration is the same thing as attention, right? So we're going to use that term sort of interchangeably within this class. It's essentially the mental effort placed on sensory or mental events. And it's a person's ability to exert deliberate mental effort on what is most important in a given situation. So, really, it means that you're able to put your mental effort in some things and then avoid other things. It's the ability or the attempt to stay on, keep your attention on some things while you're avoiding other things. There's a couple different components to concentration. And the first is, like I mentioned, this idea of being able to focus on relevant environment cues. And this is called selective attention, right? So you're selecting what in your environment around you are putting your attention on. And then anything else that isn't serving you, you are disregarding. The second component of concentration is being able to maintain that attentional focus over time and despite any distractions that are around you. Situational awareness is this ability to understand what is going around yourself. Let's take an example of pitching, right? Pitching is a great one because it's really easy to identify what a pitcher should be focusing on with any particular batter. And what the pitcher needs to focus on is how to get the ball from their glove to the catcher's glove, right? That's all they're focusing on. So, really, what's going on in their head is what kind of pitch you're going to be throwing, what is your grip, and where are you throwing it to, right? You want to throw it into the strike zone as much as possible. And so that's all you really need to focus on during the pitch. When you're talking about situational awareness, you still need to do the basic thing, right? Get your glove to the other glove, but maybe there's other things going on in that during that particular play, right? Maybe you have a runner on first and second. You have to be aware of if they're going to run to try to steal a base, things like that. So there are other things affecting the situation. And so you may need to shift your attention from not just your glove, but also to the plates around you. So like I said, that last component is to be able to shift that focus when necessary. And so in this chapter, they talk about two sort of techniques for what people tend to focus on, and it's called association or dissociation. So for association, this strategy involves you really monitoring your bodily functions, your feelings. This includes your heart rate, your breathing, muscle tension, a lot of internal sensory monitoring. This really involves tuning into the experience of the physical activity that you're doing, right? So you're focused again on your heart rate or breathing, and you're tuning into what's happening in your body as you go really, really hard during an intense workout, etc. You're able to monitor how you're feeling physically to tell you if maybe you're not working hard enough or you're working too hard, etc. And on the other end of that continuum is dissociative attentional strategy. So You're not monitoring bodily functions. You're trying to distract yourself and tune out however you're feeling. A lot of people do this also in the gym. Those of us, I do this too, those of us who put on our headphones, maybe while we're running, to distract ourselves from how our body is feeling on these runs during these physical activities. So you prefer really to not focus on how your body is feeling, but more just distract yourself and tune out so you don't feel tired. You don't feel that fatigue as you're working out. So there's been a lot of good research around association and dissociation. It happens on a continuum. It's not just one or the other. Most of the time, people use both, right? And runners will often use both. So for those at a higher level, it's better for them to really tune into their bodies to know, do they need to push harder? Are they not working hard enough? That's why these associative strategies are correlated with faster running performances, because runners are so much more aware of what's happening and when to push. When it comes to training, particularly with the more monotonous training exercises, right? Maybe ellipticals, treadmills, dissociation can often decrease fatigue and allow people to tolerate those types of exercises for a longer period of time. Sometimes when I go to the gym, cardio is not my favorite type of workout. I oftentimes want to dissociate when I'm on the treadmill. I'm listening to the music, I'm running or walking to the beat of my music so that it distracts me and makes it more fun. I'm not paying attention to my own heart rate or how tired I'm feeling. And this is often the technique that we try to that is also very useful for new exercises. Typically, new exercisers find workouts to be very difficult, and you're breathing hard, your heart rate is up, your body hurts. And so you want these exercisers to get away from that feeling. So you're encouraging dissociation for the more painful parts so that they can continue to work and continue to increase their adherence to exercise. And so obviously it's very, very important for athletes to be able to maintain attentional focus and concentration for the duration of competition. But this is so, so difficult because on average, people are engaging in thousands and thousands of thoughts in any waking day. Athletes should also be maintaining situational awareness. So if you can remember what situational awareness was, it's understanding what around your environment you need to focus on and essentially what you need to respond to during that situation. Something that's really interesting about situational awareness are the differences between experts and novices in how they are processing the environment around them and how that differs in terms of the response. And there's a really great video that I'm going to show you that demonstrates this, featuring Cristiano Ronaldo and good old Ronald, who is just an average guy. And you'll see the difference between an expert and a novice in this situation.
Ronaldo's vast experience gives him the ability to intuitively read the game under normal conditions. But what if the conditions are very far from normal? Can Ronaldo still hit the back of the net if all the lights are turned off and he's in complete darkness?
Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to have Andy feeding the balls in as if it's a cross, and then sometime in the ball flight, the lights are going to go black, so you won't be able to see anything at all. We're expecting you to be able to put the ball in the goal. That's what we're hoping will happen. We're hoping that you'll have picked up some advanced cues from Andy's body position, the shapes, the positioning of his feet and his hips, and therefore will be able to tell exactly where the ball's going to go and get yourself in the right position, even though you can't see it.
Okay. Taking Ronaldo on in the seemingly impossible test is an amateur footballer called Ronald.
Come and join me, Ronald. Ronaldo. So we've got Ronald in here, same age as you, roughly the same height. We're going to use Ronald as a comparison and see how he reacts doing this same test.
Ronald is going first.
Dark! Light!
So what does the night vision reveal? Ronald misses the ball by quite a way. Perhaps not that surprising. But can Ronaldo do any better?
I hope to do once.
Dark! Light!
Aye, that's one straight in the bag.
The night vision replay shows how differently Ronaldo performs. To confirm that wasn't just luck, another attempt.
Dark! Light!
Love that. Be careful.
And the replay?
How hard is that?
It's difficult because it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Because you are focusing on the ball, and after no light, you have to try to memorize the ball.
Human reaction time is about 200 milliseconds, and by 500 milliseconds, Ronaldo's subconscious has interpreted Andy's body language, worked out which direction the ball will go in, calculated its speed and trajectory, and then programmed his body to reach it at the optimum moment.
Love that.
It's almost as if they're doing maths in their head, even though they wouldn't be able to describe it to you. You could see from their performance that Ronaldo saw the first part of the ball flight information. He'd picked up information from Andy kicking the ball and was able to move his body into the correct position. This is because he's processed the information. He has experience of where the ball is likely to go. He's able to analyse all that as it's coming towards him and therefore connect successfully with the ball.
Love that.
Ronald, on the other hand, doesn't have this same level of experience. He would have watched the ball flight. It's likely that he will just have had his eyes on the ball instead of picking up any information from Andy himself. And then when the lights go down and it's black, he's kind of stranded in no man's land a little bit and just has to do his best to react, but is naturally going to struggle with that.
So far, the lights have been shut off when the ball is in midair, but now the lights will be turned off just at the moment Andy kicks it. Can Ronaldo score with only Andy's body language to go on?
There you go, we'll get one. We good?
Yeah, good.
Okay, Ronaldo.
Dark. Light.
Light. Aye. Ronaldo, pull it in. What was that, a shoulder? Great finish, great finish. That was a great finish.
This is great because I imagine the ball is coming. I'm scared to go with the face, so I'll go with half chest, half shoulder, and then put the ball inside.
Quality, great finish. So Zoe, tell me, how difficult is that? I mean, the last one when we adjusted the time of the lighting.
Yeah, it's so difficult. They've done studies like this using computer simulations, so you watch it on a computer and just have to say where the ball's going, and from them they can see that elite athletes can tell much earlier where the ball's coming from. But to have to actually produce a physical response when a ball is flying at you, then it's really good skills, amazing.
Top man, that's ledge.
Thank you.
I was dreading I was going to hit you in your face with one of them balls. That was my worst fear.
The test proves that Ronaldo can perform an almost impossible task. He can make decisions this quickly and with such little information to go on, because in his subconscious, he's an expert in the science involved.
Ronaldo can tap into that knowledge, tap into his memory banks, and he can then use that to help him.
So what you're saying, despite the location, because it's the first time being here, he's still recalling the pictures, what he's done previous before on other locations, maybe in matches and in training. And he's recalling all those messages, and then his brain saying, this is the execution.
Exactly, and that's kind of the whole point of people training. Even though they can't train in a match environment, they can still take their experiences from the training ground, put it into practice in the match, take things from one match and utilise it in another, and even utilise things in a really strange situation like we've got here. In terms of the match, this means that instead of having to track the ball completely onto his foot, he could be scanning to see where the goalkeeper is, if there's any movement there, so he can then place his shot past where the goalkeeper might be.
Well, it's base of my success is to improve myself all the time. So this is why I'm one of the best players in the world.
Okay, so we see that great video there. Just a perfect example of what we're talking about here in terms of expert versus novice. So experts, as compared to novice performers, are able to make faster decisions and better anticipate future events, right? So we saw Ronaldo able to take in both the ball's location as well as the kicker's form and direction to tell him where the ball was going to land. We saw that Cristiano was able to attend more to movement patterns, like I said, from the kicker who was feeding him the ball, search more systematically for cues, selectively attend to other things in the environment, such as where the goal was and which part of his body he would use to get the ball in the goal. And just in general, are more skillful in predicting ball flight patterns. So really, really just interesting stuff there. And you can see why elite athletes are able to do and accomplish what they do during competition. It's because they've done it many times. And so less attention is needed for some of the more, I guess I could say, more obvious cues, like the ball itself. And more attention can be put into reading other things around the situation that can help them to make better shots and better decisions. And so just to really hit it home, expert players attend more to the advanced information, right, than novices, and therefore can make faster decisions. Expert players attend more to movement patterns than novices, and expert players search more systematically for cues than do novices. So a lot of the attention that experts put in competition is more towards cues around them rather than the more obvious information put in front of them. Okay, here's a look at some of the theories that explain this information processing. Not going to go over it here, but these are mentioned in your book. What we do want to go over is the three processes that explain attentional focus. The three include attentional selectivity, attentional capacity, and attentional alertness. And so attentional selectivity refers to letting in some information into your processing system while other information is screened or ignored, similar to using a searchlight to focus on certain things. And what they found is that what makes athletes successful is not how long they are able to maintain attention or maintain concentration, but rather that they are choosing to focus on the correct things that will help them in their performance. And common attentional selectivity errors include being too broad in one's focus, so focusing on too many things, being distracted from the information that you do want by the information that you don't want, the inability to shift focus quick enough so that you can focus on all the relevant cues that you need. Attentional capacity is this idea that your attention is limited in the amount of information that can be processed at one time. However, athletes, expert athletes at least, seem to be able to increase this capacity of attention because they do two things: controlled processing and automatic processing. Controlled processing is using conscious effort and attention to whatever it is you're doing when you perform a skill. And then, as you can imagine, automatic processing is doing things without conscious attention. So you're doing it automatically. And so once athletes are able to be in that expert level and are able to do things more automatically, that opens up their attention capacity to focus on other cues that can help them in their performance. And then lastly, we have attentional alertness, which is when the increases in arousal narrow the attentional field that you are working with. And we talked about this in one of the arousal chapters, this idea that the higher your arousal, narrower your visual field is, and you tend to get tunnel vision and are unable to really gather all of the cues that you need to be working with. And so how are concentration and optimal performance related? In order to get optimal performance, athletes need to focus on only the relevant cues in the environment that they're in and to be able to eliminate any distractions. The more expert you are, the more you are more able to automatically process and execute movements that are critical in your performance environments. And I don't know why this is repeated here, but it's a very important point that you need to focus on only the relevant cues. Okay, so there are different types of attentional focus that are actually appropriate for depending on what sport that you're playing. These are the 4 types. This figure here is actually a really good example of how to explain this. And so really what this figure is telling you is what type of attention is needed in a specific situation. So as you can see here on the left, this y-axis going up and down, you have the width of your attentional focus. And then down below on the x-axis, you have direction. So is your attention needed for external cues or internal cues? You can see on the top left, we have external broad cues with this football player, right? And so in that situation, in that game situation, there are external cues that are happening all around you, right? You have your defense playing against you, and then your receivers, who are you going to throw the ball to? And it's broad because there are many, many cues all around you. If you look at the external narrow cue, which is down below with the golf ball, it is narrow because there's only 1 or 2 things that you need to focus on, and that's the ball and the hole. And it's external because it is something in the environment, as opposed to these figures on the right where the cues are internal and your attention must be internal. So the top is, again, that football player who is coming up and analyzing a game strategy. Again, there are a lot of cues that need to be focused on, right? There's probably a few things happening in that game plan or strategy. However, it's all internal. The attention is needed essentially in his mind. And then same thing with the golfer down below. They are doing a mental rehearsal for an upcoming performance. Their attention is focused on that. There's 1 or 2 things internally that they need to do prior to making a move in their sport. Okay, so here are just some common attentional problems or distractors that happen that make it difficult for athletes to focus on, right? And that is focusing on past events, focusing on future events, choking under pressure, overanalyzing how your body is moving, body mechanics, fatigue, and also inadequate motivation. And so we're going to talk about choking quickly. Choking is an interesting concept, and it's often viewed as an attentional problem. It happens when athletes are unable to regain control over their performance without outside assistance. Usually it leads to performers thinking about and using conscious step-by-step execution of the skills that they're obviously so used to doing, and it's no longer automatic movement for them. All their attention is going on how they're moving and what they're doing, and thus it leads to impaired performance. And so here's a figure in your book that puts the choking process into a nice visual here. One of the key things that you want to be aware of when working with expert performers is that once a key skill is learned well, overemphasis on body mechanics is and can be detrimental to performance. And a good example of this is, say you have, again, we'll go back to the baseball example, a professional baseball player who is working or trying to change their body mechanics of how they bat. I'm a Dodgers fan, Cody Bellinger. We have seen him change his batting stance quite a few times over the few years that he's been in the league. Oftentimes, when we see Cody switching up his batting stance, he goes through periods where he is just unable to hit a ball. And this is a good example of potentially what's happening with his attention. His attention is focused on these new body mechanics that he's not so used to. And so an overemphasis on that attention to his body mechanics can be detrimental to performance. However, once he keeps practicing that particular stance, and once it becomes automatic to him, that is when we'll start to see an increase in performance outcomes, right? He'll get really good at it, and no longer will he need to use much of his attention on the body mechanics. He can just focus on the situational cues around him. So that is an example of that. Recognizing attentional problems. So external distractors are usually stimuli from the environment that take away people's attention from cues that they need to focus on. There's a lot of visual distractors, spectators in sport. We often see the crowds during basketball games behind the free throw line who are purposely trying to distract the players. So players need to really focus on what's in front of them and definitely not them. And then we also have auditory distractors. So planes flying over, loud or unexpected noises. Athletes need to recognize that these are distractors and not the cues that they want to focus on. So how do we improve concentration? It really requires mental effort and intentionality by the athlete. Oftentimes, skilled athletes try to divide their attention between more than one action at the same time, but focusing consciously on only one thing at a time will help to improve their concentration. So really being mindful and present. So athletes tend to lose their concentration when they pay attention to events and experiences that are not the present, right? If they're worried too much about the future, they're worried too much about the past and what happened, things that are out of control, then they tend to lose concentration and that attentional focus that they need. And this is very much connected to anxiety. Anxiety can, again, put too much focus on things that they don't need to and that should be automatic to them. And so it also tends to affect performance. So teaching athletes how to stay in the present and not worry about the past, not worry about the future, just focus on the cues that are in front of them, that is very, very important. And we call that mindfulness. It's the awareness that emerges through paying attention, intentional purpose in the present moment, and non-judgmentally experiencing the moment that you're in, right? So not worrying about how you look, not worrying about what other people will think, just staying in the moment and doing what you need to do. And so here are some techniques to help improve concentration. Practicing with distractions during practice and simulating those very distracting moments that might occur to get athletes used to those. Using cue words to refocus. So both instructional and motivational words, things like push, keep going, focus, words like that to sort of reset and bring you back to the present moment. Employ non-judgmental thinking. Establish routines, so pre-performance routines, both before a competition, but also during the event. So routines before you bat, routines before you serve. Develop competition plans. And overlearn skills. So overlearning skills, again, related to that idea that if you do a skill enough, it becomes automatic, and therefore less attention is needed for that particular skill, and you can focus on other things that you need to focus on around you. So let's talk a little bit about self-talk. This is a really important mental skill, and it's one that we all use, whether we realize it or not, right? Anything that goes on in our head is really an internal type of self-talk. Sometimes a lot of us can use it more externally, where we say things out loud, but really anything that we are thinking or saying to ourselves is considered self-talk. It can really be used in many ways, right? We can use it to improve our concentration, to psych us up and like improve confidence. If we need to remind ourselves how to do a certain skill, we can remind ourselves cues on how to do it. So different things like that. So again, self-talk, we all use it. Let's dive deeper into what it can look like for us and how we can use it to our advantage. So using self-talk to enhance concentration, it's, like I said, any statement or thought about ourselves. So using appropriate self-talk can help us to focus on the present and keeps our mind from wandering into a whole bunch of other thoughts that really are not necessary in that moment, right? And so there are different types of self-talk. We have positive or more motivational self-talk. And like I said, those are mostly used for improving confidence, things like that. We have instructional self-talk. So like I said, the cues that we tell ourselves to remind ourselves how to do certain things. And also negative self-talk. So positive and negative self-talk. The bad things we say to ourselves is also detrimental to our performance. So self-talk can be broken down into different components. And so there are different categories when it comes to positive self-talk. We have the psych up, so phrases that can help us to increase our power or our strength, confidence. We've mentioned that a couple times. Instruction, focusing on the specific techniques, and then also using it as ways to control anxiety or calm us down. The categories of negative self-talk include worrying, so focusing on the future and what might go wrong, disengagement, so giving up, wanting to give up, and then somatic fatigue. I'm tired, my body hurts, things like that. There's also a neutral self-talk category with just irrelevant thoughts that really have nothing to do with anything. And so how self-talk works is usually there is an event or something happens, such as missing an important shot during a tennis match, whatever it is. Immediately we have thoughts that go into our head, and that is the self-talk. In this case, keep your eye on the ball. This match isn't over. This is a positive self-talk that is reminding this player to keep going, giving themselves this instructional cue, right? To keep their eye on the ball, don't lose focus. And then there is a response. Depending on what kind of self-talk that is, that response can either be positive or negative, right? So in this case, there's better concentration, optimism, and calm because that self-talk is positive. Here in the chart or flow chart, we see that there's an example of negative self-talk in that same situation, right? Again, in that situation, the player misses an important shot. They call themselves an idiot and that they'll never win. Therefore, what results in the response is anger, hopelessness, and increased muscle tension. So in any situation, there are two ways you can go. You can either go positive or negative, and you can see the results there. So it's important to always focus on the positive, right? No matter what situation you're in, because in turn, that will very, very likely affect the rest of your performance. And just as I said, performers who are able to think more positively about negative stressful events are more successful. However, there's this ironic processing that occurs sometimes where if you're trying so hard not to do a particular negative action, it inadvertently causes that event to occur. So telling yourself, in this example, driving into the water hazard in golf, if you're telling yourself, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water, there's sort of that negative self-fulfilling prophecy that sometimes happens where it causes you to do that particular negative action. So again, you kind of just want to shift that negative self-talk, even though it's meant to be positive, that don't hit it in the water. A better way to phrase it would be to focus on driving the ball straight or driving the ball onto the green, right? So focusing on more of the positive rather than the action that you don't want to do. Okay, so gone over The uses of self-talk, again, motivational, initiating action, sustaining effort, instructional, acquiring a new skill, breaking bad habits, etc. All right, so when it comes to self-talk and performance enhancement, it has been shown that positive self-talk improves performance. There are very, very specific few situations where negative self-talk can enhance performance as well. And I guess that'll definitely depend on the athlete or the performer themselves and whatever situation they're in. It's important to determine the type of task, the most appropriate type of self-talk needed to enhance performance on this particular task. Depending on whatever task it is, do you need to be motivated? Do you need specific instruction? Do you need to break a certain habit? What is the skill that you're trying to do? What is the task you're trying to do? It's also important to consider culture when it comes to looking at positive and negative self-talk. In the book, it mentions that certain cultures sort of thrive more on this self sort of criticism and the negative self-talk versus other types of cultures where positive self-talk is encouraged and there's more value in that. So just things to consider. There are 6 rules for creating effective self-talk. 1 is keeping those phrases short and specific. 2, use the first person and the present tense when creating these statements. Construct positive phrases. So again, focusing on the positive self-talk. Say your phrases with meaning and intention. And this can feel very silly sometimes, talking to yourself, it can feel really silly, and it's important to recognize and to say, hey, I know this will be a little bit weird, talking to yourself. It might feel a little awkward at first, but the more you do it, the more you say it, the more meaning and attention you put behind your self-talk, the more you start to believe it and the more it'll work. Speak kindly to yourself. And again, repeat phrases often. So changing negative self-talk to positive self-talk. So it's important to recognize that as human beings, we have negative thoughts that run through our head pretty frequently, pretty automatically. And so with that, it's often hard to just stop thinking those things, right? We're human, it happens. And so this idea of thought stopping in your book is something that people in sports psychology have tried different exercises to try to just automatically stop those negative thoughts in your head. But really, that's not sustainable and it'll happen. And so people are shifting away from that thought stopping strategy and shifting more into this mindfulness acceptance of those thoughts, right? And so here in your book is an example of accepting those negative thoughts, but being able to cognitively reframe them into something more positive. There's some great examples here of these automatic thoughts that may come to our head when certain situations happen, and then how we can accept those, saying things to ourselves like everyone makes mistakes or there's really nothing I could do about it. And then changing those thoughts into something more positive, more productive, that'll help us in our performance. And so one of the exercises that I like to give athletes if I think negative self-talk might be affecting their performance is to keep a log of the self-talk that's going in your head. Every time you recognize and hear yourself saying something negative, write it down. Jot down the time and see how often these thoughts occur and work on how to change those phrases into something more positive and see if that helps you. See if that helps you in competition and in life. That is it for today. Thanks everyone for joining me. I will see you all next week.